Welcome back to my channel. My name is August Rose Crothers. I'm an author, poet, content creator, and founder of a literary magazine. And today, since we are almost halfway through the year, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I have read in 2026 so far. I have read, let's see how many I've read. Okay, so I've read like 12 books this year. The first time ever, I've been keeping track of all the books that I've been reading in this little like book club journal that I got from Target like January of this year. Honestly, I'm gonna do the same thing next year, but I'm gonna get a different journal because I don't quite like all the prompts that are in this journal, but I do like that it helps me kind of keep track of everything that I've read and what I've rated it. So if you like content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe for more. It really helps channels like mine grow. Before I get into it, I just need to say that I have not had the best luck with my books and reading so far this year. I have DNF'd quite a few books. Like, I just have not fallen in love with a lot of books, but also I'm kind of having this mindset as I get older is like there's so many books in the world that I want to read. Like, I'm not going to force myself to read a book that I don't love anymore. Let's just get right into it, and I'm going to go in order of when I read them this year. Okay, the very first book that I read in 2026 is an indie author read, and it's called Pieces of Me by Bree Cottrell. Bree actually sent me this copy after we became kind of like online friends on TikTok, and I am so very grateful for it. This was a romantic comedy. I rated it 3 stars. I really enjoyed this book. I loved her writing, and I loved the characters. It was really great. So if you're looking to support an indie author, this is one of the recs that I would have for you. Next, I read another romance called Funny You Should Ask by Elisa Sussman. I rated this 3 stars. I actually DNF'd this book. I really loved the beginning, and then the middle was okay, but by the time I got like 3/4 of the way through, I personally didn't care to know anymore about the story. This book is basically about a writer who interviews this big time celebrity. They have this like whirlwind crazy weekend together, and she reports it. The interview goes viral, and then 10 years later, they reunite to try to recreate this interview. The next one was kind of an interesting book because it was a poetry book, but it was also a memoir. It was a poetry book, but it was also a memoir, and it was called Poetry Will Save Your Life by Jill Bielaski. This was my first thing I've ever read from this author, and honestly, I want to pick up her other books just from this one. I have a lot of tags in it. I rated this book 4.5 stars. By the time I got towards the end, I just kind of was like, what's the word? Like breezing through it. But yeah, she basically recalls her life, and she kind of chapters them by poems that she discovers in that time period that help her kind of get through that time period. And I really loved the premise. I thought it was so interesting. There were so many poems that I had never read before that I fell in love with because of her and her writing and her connection to these poems. Next was another indie author read, and I actually read it as an ARC first, and then the author sent me the copy, and it's my good online friend Ayana. Her book is called Honeywind Forest. This was kind of an interesting genre. I don't remember exactly how she genres it, but I would just genre it as like fantasy fiction. And it's about this ex-ballerina who is kind of going through this like phase of life where she is looking for like rediscovery. She's looking for purpose. She's looking for like how to heal after certain large events of her life have happened. I rated this book 4 stars. Really great book. Ayana's writing is absolutely beautiful, and I really enjoyed the story. So another indie author read, and this was also one of my more higher rated books of the year. Next is a poetry book that is kind of stuck on my shelf, so I'm just going to put a picture of it here. Is Love Poems by Rumi. These are obviously very old poems, and a lot of them were kind of more like small quotes and like scriptures almost, and I think the translation was a little off because it didn't necessarily feel like poetry to me, and this was more of a book that I was just kind of like breezing through. So I rated this one 2.5 stars, and I didn't finish it, unfortunately. Next was another indie author read, and this one is a romance. It is Right Where You Left Me by Lana Vargas. This was another one that was sent to me by the author. Thank you, Lana, very much. This is one of my higher rated books of the year. I rated this 4.5 stars. And Right Where You Left Me is kind of the Notebook style romance about this couple from high school who separate, and then years later they kind of fall into each other's lives again, and they're forced to kind of reconnect with their past and decide what they want to do with their future. Really loved this book, and I'm excited for her next book in this series. Next was this fiction book called Sweet Bitter by Stephanie Danler. This was a book that wasn't necessarily on my TBR, but I was just kind of browsing around in my used bookstore one day, and I came across this book, and the back cover really had me interested. Really, I only rated this book 3 stars. honestly, because I just really didn't enjoy it and I didn't finish this book. Because this book is about a young girl who moves to New York City and gets a job in a restaurant, and it's basically about this restaurant job. Kind of talk about how set against the glitzy, grimy backdrop of elite restaurants. Also talk about champagne and cocaine, love and lust, dive bars, and fine dining. I personally felt like the synopsis on the back cover was a little misleading. This book was kind of boring to me. I feel bad for saying this because I know a lot of people love this book. I know this book was turned into a show that a lot of people loved, but I thought it was going to actually be a true representation of what it's like to work in a hotel. This is a representation of what it's like to work in a very pretentious, hard to get into restaurant, and that's like a very different environment than actual restaurant working as somebody who used to be a server and bartender. This is, if I had to re-rate this, because I kind of gave it a high rating because I didn't want to be mean. If I had to re-rate this and be a little mean, I would rate this like 2 stars. Like, this just was not for me. But if you love this book, that makes me happy for you. The next one was, an audiobook actually. It was Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. This is obviously one of the most popular books of the year, and I have to say this was my favorite book I've read this year so far. The audiobook narrator is just absolutely perfect. So enjoyable. I found myself literally laughing out loud at certain parts because the writing and the narration of this main character is just so insane. If you have not heard on TikTok, Yesteryear is a book about a trad wife influencer who wakes up in 1855 and basically has to live the life that she has been romanticizing. An extremely unlikable main protagonist, and I loved that. I loved the themes it talked about. I loved how it was like a reflection of kind of like what's going on in our modern world. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, and so that's why, even though I really, really love this book, I rated it 4.5 stars. The next one was What Happens After Midnight by K.L. Walther. I just talked about this book in my last vlog. I read the first book from her, The Summer of Broken Rules, a few years ago, and I really loved that book. And so I was really excited to read this, and I rated this book 3 stars. I kind of had to force myself to finish it. But this book is basically about this young girl who has been at a boarding school her whole life. She's about to graduate, and she gets roped in on this senior prank with her ex-boyfriend, and so the majority of the book takes place in one night as her and her ex-boyfriend and her friends are carrying out the senior prank. My only strife with this book is that I think it was too long. I think if this book was like 50 to 70 pages shorter, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. And I think because the majority of it takes place in one night, with it being so long, I felt myself like getting bored. Next is a poetry collection, Invisible Strings, 113 poets respond to the songs of Taylor Swift. Even as a big Taylor Swift fan, this was my lowest rated book of the year. And it has a lot of poets in this book who I really truly love. I rated this book 1.5 stars. And for a poetry book, which I got like at least halfway through on, I only tagged 2 poems. So I'm reading 2 books at the moment. I'm reading Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. This is the first time I have ever read any one of her books, and I'm really loving this book. I just started reading it a week ago, and I'm already like 3/4 of the way through. I'm probably gonna finish this book tonight, which is very fast for me. I am known to be kind of a slow reader, but this is a really, really lovely book. But so many people have read Carly Fortune. If you have not, go ahead and pick this up. And then I'm also reading another indie author read. I'm reading an indie poetry collection called The Synesthete's Rainbow, Poetry in the Colors of Love. So it's from this girl, Nisha, who I found online on TikTok. And I love her content. I'm reading it right now and I'm really loving it. Nisha has synesthesia. So she's basically writing poems of how she sees love and how she's experienced this situationship that she went through the perspective of having synesthesia. So great concept. I'm loving this so far. I've only like a little bit of the way through, but I think I'm gonna finish it this week. That is all the books that I've read this year so far. Oh wait, I'm reading one more. I am listening to an audiobook right now, another really popular one, Into the Blue by Emma Corbin. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm about halfway through, and I almost put this book down. I told myself, like, no, it's just an audiobook. Make sure to listen to it, right? So I got about halfway through the other day, and when you find out the twist of like what happened with this male protagonist and why he disappears, I was like, oh, I'm so glad I kept listening to this. I'm gonna finish it, because this is exactly, Into the Blue is exactly the kind of book I should be reading and listening to right now, considering what I'm writing, which I have not like officially announced the premise of the book that I'm writing right now, but I will very soon. Now, that is all the books that I've read this year, 13. And it is the end of May at the time of filming this. So I'm hoping I can get to 30 books by the end of the year. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.